The Galactic Council had seen many species join the stars. They had watched the Krix conquer 3 systems with their acid blood. They had witnessed the Vorn break planets with their gravity weapons. They had recorded the Sealith mind-link their enemies into madness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared them for the humans. Commander Thex of the Voltari Imperial Fleet stood on the bridge of his warship and stared at the battlefield below. The planet Nexar 7 was burning. His forces had landed 3 days ago to claim this world for the Voltari Empire, as was their right. The native Gret population had resisted, as expected, and then Earth had sent help. The humans arrived in 12 ships, 12 small ships against his fleet of 40. Thex had laughed. His officers had laughed. Everyone had laughed. They were not laughing now. The human ships were fast, too fast. They moved through space like nothing Thex had ever seen. And when the ground forces deployed, the Voltari learned what human soldiers could do. Lieutenant Jenna Park checked her rifle and looked across the field. Bodies lay everywhere. Voltari soldiers in their black armor, Gret defenders in their simple cloth, and human marines in their gray combat suits. The battle had been fierce, but it was over now. "Medical teams move out," she ordered through her helmet comm. "Full sweep. Everyone gets treated." Private First Class Marcus Chen grabbed his medical kit and ran toward the nearest cluster of fallen soldiers. Most were Voltari, the enemy, the ones who had been shooting at him 10 minutes ago. "Sir," his squad mate called out, "those are hostiles." Marcus did not stop running. "They're wounded. Move it, Rodriguez." The Voltari soldier on the ground was missing a leg. Green blood pooled around him. His 4 eyes stared up at Marcus with a mix of fear and confusion. His mandibles clicked rapidly, making sounds that the translator in Marcus's helmet turned into words. "Kill me," the Voltari said. "End it. I will not beg for mercy." Marcus knelt beside him and pulled out a tourniquet. "Nobody's killing anybody. Hold still." The Voltari tried to push him away, but he was too weak from blood loss. "What are you doing? I am your enemy. I killed 3 of your soldiers today." "And now you're bleeding out on the ground," Marcus said, applying the tourniquet with practiced hands. "Hold still or I'll have to sedate you." Across the battlefield, the same scene played out again and again. Human medics moved through the chaos, treating anyone who needed help. They did not check uniforms first. They did not ask which side the wounded fought for. They simply saw injuries and fixed them. Commander Thex watched all of this through his ship's cameras. His first officer, Sub-Commander Erin, stood beside him with her mouth hanging open. "What are they doing?" she asked. "I do not know," Thex admitted. "They are treating our soldiers who were trying to kill them." "I can see that." "Why?" Thex had no answer. In 300 years of Voltari warfare, he had never seen anything like this. When you defeated an enemy, you killed them. When you captured them, you extracted information and then killed them. You did not waste resources healing those who would only fight you again. "Perhaps it is a trap," Erin suggested. "They heal our wounded to gain their trust, then use them as hostages." "Perhaps," Thex said, though he did not believe it. The humans were not acting like people setting a trap. They were acting like people doing their jobs. On the ground, Lieutenant Park coordinated the medical response. The battle had killed 200 Voltari soldiers, 80 Gret defenders, and 12 human marines. Another 400 Voltari were wounded, along with 150 Gret and 23 humans. Her medical teams were treating them all. A Gret elder approached her, his long ears pulled back in what she had learned meant surprise. "Human warrior," he said through her translator, "why do you heal the ones who attacked us?" "Standard protocol," Park said. "The Geneva Convention requires treatment of all wounded combatants." Geneva Convention. It's a set of rules we agreed on back on Earth. How to treat prisoners, wounded enemies, civilians, that kind of thing. The Gret elder looked at her with all 3 of his eyes. You have rules about how to treat your enemies. Several hundred pages of them, actually. The elder was silent for a long moment. Then he made a sound that the translator could not interpret. Park guessed it was the Gret version of complete bewilderment. 2 days later, the situation had become even stranger. The human field hospital had been set up in a valley between two mountains. It held wounded from all sides. Voltari soldiers lay in beds next to Gret farmers. Human medics moved between them all, checking vitals and changing bandages. Lieutenant Park was reviewing supply reports when a shadow fell across her desk. She looked up to find a Voltari officer standing there. His rank insignia marked him as a sub-leader, roughly equivalent to a sergeant. "You are the human commander?" he asked. "Field commander for medical operations, yes, Lieutenant Park." "I am sub-leader Kreth. Your people saved my life yesterday. I was shot through the chest. Your medics put a machine inside me to help my heart keep beating until they could repair the damage." Park nodded. "A pacemaker, temporary measure. You should have a full recovery." Kreth's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. "Why did you do this?" "Do what?" "Save me. I killed one of your soldiers before I was shot. I watched him die. Then your people carried me to this place and healed me." Park set down her tablet and looked at the Voltari directly. "Sub-leader Kreth, when we found you on that battlefield, you were not a soldier. You were not an enemy. You were a wounded person who needed help. That's all that mattered. But I will be ordered to fight you again when I recover." "Probably. And you saved me anyway." "Yes." Kreth stood there for a long moment, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Then he turned and walked back to his bed without another word. Park watched him go. This was not the first time she had seen this reaction. Every species humanity had encountered in the 3 decades since first contact had responded the same way to the human approach to war. Confusion, disbelief, sometimes anger, but always eventually something else, something that gave Park hope. In orbit, Commander Thex received reports from his surviving soldiers. They told him about the human hospital, about the medics who worked through the night to save Voltari lives, about the food they were given, the same food the humans ate themselves, about the beds and the medicine and the care. "This makes no sense," Thex said to Iran. "They could hold our soldiers as prisoners, extract information, use them as shields. Instead, they heal them and give them comfortable beds." "Perhaps the humans are weak," Iran suggested. "Perhaps they do not have the strength to do what is necessary." Thex thought about the battle 2 days ago. He thought about the human Marines who had charged his positions without fear, who had fought with a fury that surprised even him, who had killed 200 of his soldiers while losing only 12 of their own. "No," he said, "the humans are not weak, they are something else entirely." Back at the hospital, Private Marcus Chen sat beside the bed of the Voltari soldier he had saved. The alien's name was Teth, and he was 147 years old. He had been a soldier for 112 of those years. "In all my time," Teth said slowly, "I have never seen anything like this. I have fought 63 species. None of them healed their enemies." Marcus shrugged. "We're kind of weird that way." "Why do you do it?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. It was a question he had thought about many times since joining the medical corps. "Because on Earth, we learned something a long time ago. We learned that the enemy today might be the friend tomorrow. We learned that hatred is expensive and forgiveness is cheap. We learned that everyone, no matter what uniform they wear, has someone waiting for them to come home." Teth's mandibles clicked softly. "That is a strange philosophy." "Maybe, but it's ours." Outside the hospital, the night sky of Nexar 7 was filled with stars. Somewhere up there, more Voltari ships were gathering. More battles would come. More people would be hurt and killed on both sides. But for now, in this small valley, humans and Voltari and Gret rested side by side. and none of them could quite explain why that felt so important. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle on Nexar 7. The Voltari had retreated to regroup, and the humans had used the time to strengthen their position. But the real battle, Lieutenant Park was beginning to realize, was not being fought with guns and ships. It was being fought with bandages and kindness. The hospital had grown. What started as a temporary field station was now a permanent structure built from local materials and prefabricated modules shipped from Earth. It had 100 beds, a full surgical suite, and staff from 12 different countries back home. And it had become famous. Word had spread through the Voltari ranks about the human hospital. Soldiers who had been treated there were telling stories. Stories about medics who worked themselves to exhaustion saving enemy lives. Stories about doctors who wept when patients died, even enemy patients. Stories about a species that fought like demons and healed like angels. Subleader Kreth had been discharged from the hospital 2 weeks ago. He was supposed to return to his unit and prepare for the next assault. Instead, he had asked Commander Thex for permission to study the humans. "Study them?" Thex had asked. "Yes, Commander. I believe understanding their behavior could give us a tactical advantage." It was a lie, and Kreth suspected that Thex knew it, but the commander had agreed anyway. Perhaps he was curious too. So Kreth had returned to the human hospital as an observer. He watched the doctors make their rounds. He watched the nurses change dressings and check monitors. He watched the human soldiers visit their wounded comrades and sometimes visit the wounded Voltari too. "You don't have to do this," a human soldier named Jackson said one day. He was sitting beside a Voltari patient named Vex who had lost an arm in the battle. "I mean, I was the one who shot you." Vex's remaining arm twitched. "Why do you come here?" "Because nobody should be alone when they're hurting." "I am your enemy." "You were my enemy 3 weeks ago. Right now you're just a guy in a hospital bed." Jackson pulled a small device from his pocket. "Hey, you want to see something?" Vex did not respond, which Jackson took as permission. He activated the device, and a holographic image appeared above it. A human female and 2 small children. "That's my family," Jackson said. "Wife Maria, daughter Elena, son Daniel. Elena's 7, Daniel's 4. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because somewhere up there in your fleet you probably have people waiting for you too. Family, friends, people who care if you live or die." Jackson put the device away. "I wasn't shooting at you because I wanted you dead. I was shooting at you because I wanted to go home to them." Vex was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer. "I have a mate, 2 offspring. They live on the Voltari homeworld." "Tell me about them." Kreth listened to the conversation from across the room. He listened as Vex described his family, his home, his hopes for his children. He listened as Jackson shared stories about his own kids, about teaching Elena to ride a bike and watching Daniel take his first steps. These 2 had tried to kill each other less than a month ago. Now they were sharing the most precious parts of their lives. Kreth did not understand, but he was beginning to feel something he had not felt in 100 years of warfare, something uncomfortable and strange. He was beginning to hope. On the bridge of his warship, Commander Thex received daily reports about the human hospital. He read them with growing unease. His soldiers were not being tortured or interrogated. They were being fed, healed, and treated with respect. Some of them were even starting to ask questions. "Commander," Iran said one day, "we have a problem." "Another one." "The soldiers who have returned from the human hospital, they are speaking to others, spreading ideas." "What kind of ideas?" Iran hesitated. This was not the kind of report she enjoyed giving. "They are questioning the war, Commander. Some are asking why we cannot simply negotiate with the humans. Others are asking why we do not treat our own wounded as well as the humans treat theirs." Thex's jaw tightened. "That is dangerous talk." Yes, Commander, what should we do? The correct answer by Voltari military law was obvious. Those soldiers should be executed for sedition. Their words should be erased, their families punished, their memory forgotten. But Thex found himself hesitating. He had watched the recordings from the hospital. He had seen the human medic named Chen working for 36 hours straight to save a Voltari soldier's life. He had watched the human doctor named Okonkwo perform surgery on 3 Voltari and 2 Gret before collapsing from exhaustion. He had seen human soldiers share their food, their stories, their very humanity with beings who had been trying to kill them days before. And he had seen his own soldiers begin to change. For now, Thex said slowly, do nothing. Monitor the situation but take no action. Commander, I want to understand what we are dealing with, Sub-Commander. Before we respond, we need to understand. Erin did not argue. She had served with Thex for 50 years. She knew when he was working through a problem. Down on the planet, Lieutenant Park was facing her own challenges. The hospital was running low on supplies. The human fleet had sent what they could, but the next supply ship was still 2 weeks away. We need to make choices, her chief medical officer said. Dr. Okonkwo was a tall man from Nigeria with tired eyes and steady hands. We can't treat everyone at the current rate. What are our options? We could prioritize. Treat human soldiers first, then allies, then enemies. Park shook her head, unacceptable. Jenna, we don't have the resources to. Then we get more resources. Park pulled up her communication console. There has to be a way. She sent messages to every human ship in the system. She contacted the Gret Council to ask for local medical supplies. She even, after much hesitation, sent a message to the Voltari fleet. The response surprised everyone. An hour later, a Voltari shuttle landed outside the hospital. Subleader Kreth emerged, followed by 4 soldiers carrying crates. Medical supplies, Kreth said, from Commander Thex. Park stared at him. I don't understand. Neither do we. Kreth gestured to the soldiers, who began unloading the crates. The commander said that our soldiers in your hospital should not suffer because of your supply problems. He said that this is not how war should be fought. The commander is sending us supplies to help us heal his own soldiers. And your soldiers, and the Gret. Kreth's mandibles clicked in what Park had learned to recognize as discomfort. I told you, Lieutenant, we do not understand, but we are beginning to feel something. What's that? Kreth was silent for a long moment. Then he said a word that Park's translator struggled with before finally rendering it as shame. The supplies from the Voltari changed everything. It was not just the medicine and equipment, though those helped. It was what the delivery represented, a crack in the wall, a moment of connection across the vast divide of war. Word spread quickly through both camps. The humans had asked their enemies for help, and their enemies had given it. Private Marcus Chen heard about it while on duty at the hospital. He was checking on Teth, who was recovering well but still required daily treatment. Your commander sent us supplies, Marcus said. Medical equipment, medicine, everything we needed. Teth's eyes blinked in sequence. That is unexpected. Yeah, we were surprised too. Commander Thex has fought for 200 years. He has never shown mercy to an enemy, not once. People can change. Teth made a sound that might have been a laugh. Can they? I am 147 years old, human. I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched empires crumble and new ones take their place. In all that time, I have never seen anyone change. Marcus sat down beside the bed. Let me tell you a story. Back on Earth, about 500 years ago, there was a country called Japan. They were invaded and conquered by another country called America. It was brutal. Cities were destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of people died. There was so much hate between them that people thought it would last forever. What happened? They became friends. Best friends, actually. Within 50 years, they were trading partners and allies. The kids who grew up in those burned cities became the parents of kids who grew up in peaceful ones. The hate just faded away. Teth was quiet, then he said, "That seems impossible." "That's the thing about humans. We're kind of good at impossible." On the bridge of his ship, Commander Thex made a decision. He opened a channel to the human flagship. "Human Commander," he said, "I am Commander Thex of the Voltari Imperial Fleet. I request a meeting." There was a long pause, then a human voice responded. "Commander Thex, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. A meeting about what?" "About your hospital, about your soldiers, about everything you have done here." Thex took a breath. "I do not understand you, Admiral, but I believe I must try." Another pause, then, "Agreed, Commander, let's talk." The meeting took place on neutral ground, a small station that orbited one of Nexar's 7 moons. Admiral Sarah Chen arrived with 3 officers and no guards. Commander Thex did the same. "You trust us," Thex observed as they sat across from each other. "You bring no weapons, no protection." "Do I need them?" Thex's mandibles clicked. "No, you do not, and that is precisely what confuses me." Admiral Chen was 62 years old. She had gray hair, sharp eyes, and hands that had signed more treaties than death warrants. She had joined the military when humanity first reached the stars, and she had spent 30 years trying to make contact with alien species mean something more than warfare. "Commander Thex," she said, "why are we fighting?" "Because the Voltari Empire claims Nexar 7. Your people interfered." "And why does the Empire want Nexar 7? Thex hesitated. It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Resources, strategic position, the glory of conquest. "Is that worth dying for? Is it worth sending your soldiers to die for?" "It is what we do. It is what we have always done." Chen nodded slowly. "Let me tell you about humanity, Commander. We've been killing each other since before we could write. Wars over land, wars over religion, wars over pride. Hundreds of millions dead over thousands of years. We got very good at killing. I have seen your soldiers fight. Yes, you are skilled. But something happened along the way. We started asking questions. We started wondering if there was a better way. And slowly, painfully, we started to change." Chen leaned forward. "We didn't stop fighting, Commander. Humans will probably always fight, but we created rules, limits, ways to be enemies without being monsters. Your Geneva Convention. That's one of them. There are others. Laws about war, about treatment of prisoners, about protecting civilians. They're not perfect, and they're not always followed. But they exist because we decided that even in war, there are some things we won't do." Thex thought about his own people's history. 2,000 years of conquest. Hundreds of species subjugated or destroyed. Not once had anyone suggested rules about how to treat enemies. "Your soldiers in our hospital," he said. "They treat our wounded as if they matter. They do matter. But they are enemies. Today they are. Tomorrow, who knows?" Chen spread her hands. "Commander, I've seen enemies become allies more times than I can count. I've seen people who wanted to kill each other end up as friends, partners, even family. It happens when you start seeing the other side as people instead of targets. That is a dangerous philosophy. Maybe, but it's also our only hope. Eventually, every species figures out that the universe is too big and too hard to conquer alone. You can keep making enemies or you can start making friends. We decided to make friends." Thex was silent for a long time. His officers watched him nervously. This was not how negotiations usually went. Finally, he spoke. "The Voltari Empire has conquered for 2,000 years. We have never known any other way." "There's always another way, Commander. The question is whether you're brave enough to look for it." The meeting ended without resolution, but something had shifted. Thex returned to his ship with questions he had never asked before. Chen returned to hers with hope she was afraid to feel. Back at the hospital, Lieutenant Park was dealing with a new crisis. Teth, the old Voltari soldier, had taken a turn for the worse. His injuries were healing, but his age was catching up with him. His body was shutting down. "There's nothing more we can do," Dr. Okonkwo said quietly. "His systems are failing. He has maybe a day, 2 at most." Park looked through the window at the old warrior. Marcus Chen was sitting beside him, holding one of his hands. They were talking in low voices. "He's been a soldier for 112 years, Park said. "He's probably killed thousands of people. And now he's dying in a hospital bed, surrounded by people who were his enemies." Okonkwo shook his head. "Funny how things work out." Park entered the room. Marcus looked up at her with red eyes. "He's telling me about his family," Marcus said. "His mate died 50 years ago. His children grew up and had children of their own. He's got 6 grandchildren." Teth's voice was weak but clear. "I have not seen them in 20 years. The war. There is always another war." Park sat down on the other side of the bed. "Teth, is there anything we can do? Anyone we can contact for you?" The old Voltari's mandibles clicked softly. "I want them to know how I died. Not in battle, not in glory. In a hospital bed being cared for by my enemies. I want them to know that such things are possible. We'll make sure they know." "And human, Marcus." Teth's grip tightened on Marcus's hand. "Tell your children about me. Tell them that an old Voltari warrior learned something in his last days. Tell them that kindness is stronger than hate." Marcus's voice broke. "I will, I promise." Teth died the next morning as the sun rose over Nexar 7. He was surrounded by human medics who had spent weeks trying to save him. His last words were the names of his grandchildren. When Commander Thex heard about Teth's death, he did something unexpected. He ordered a moment of silence on every ship in his fleet. Not for a hero's death in battle, but for an old soldier who had found peace among strangers. Then he opened a channel to Admiral Chen. "Admiral," he said, "I would like to extend the ceasefire, and I would like to talk more." Chen smiled. "I'd like that too, Commander." The ceasefire held for 3 weeks. During that time, human medics treated more Voltari wounded. Voltari shuttles brought more supplies. Soldiers from both sides began to interact, cautiously at first, then with growing ease. Private Jackson, the soldier who had shot Vex, visited him every day until Vex was discharged. When Vex left, they exchanged contact codes. They promised to find each other if they survived the war. Subleader Kreth requested a permanent posting at the human hospital. He said he wanted to learn their medical techniques. Everyone knew it was more than that. The Gret, watching all of this, began to hope that their world might survive after all. And throughout the galaxy, word spread. Rumors at first, then confirmed reports, then something like legend. Earth sent warriors who healed enemies after battle. Earth sent soldiers who wept for fallen foes. Earth sent humans who believed that every life had value, even the lives of those who tried to take theirs. The Galactic Council debated what it meant. Some said the humans were weak. Some said they were naive. Some said they were playing a long game nobody else understood. But some, a growing few, began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the humans were right. The ceasefire ended after 6 weeks, not because either side wanted to fight, but because forces beyond their control demanded it. The Voltari High Command sent new orders to Commander Thex: crush the human resistance and claim Nexar 7, or face execution for failure. Thex stood on his bridge and read the orders again. His first officer waited in silence. "Sub-Commander," Thex said finally, "what do you think of these orders?" Erin hesitated. 6 weeks ago, she would have answered without thinking. Now, everything was different. "I think they were written by people who have not seen what we have seen. The High Command has ruled for 3,000 years. They have never been wrong." "Have they never, Commander? Or have they simply never been questioned? Thex did not respond. He stared at the orders, then at the planet below. Somewhere down there, in a valley between two mountains, humans were still healing Voltari wounded. His soldiers were eating human food and learning human songs and asking questions that could get them killed. And he was supposed to destroy all of it. "The attack begins in 12 hours, he said. "Inform all ships." But even as he spoke the words, he knew something had changed. He was not the same commander who had arrived at Nexar 7 3 months ago. The humans had done something to him, something he could not name but could not deny. On the ground, Lieutenant Park received warning of the coming attack. She had 12 hours to evacuate the hospital or face destruction. "We're not leaving," she said. Dr. Okonkwo stared at her. "Lieutenant, if we stay, we die. If we leave, our patients die. Humans, Gret and Voltari." Park shook her head. "We don't abandon patients, ever." "That's a lovely sentiment, but—" "It's not a sentiment, it's who we are." Park stood up. "Get the non-critical patients ready for evacuation. Anyone who can be moved safely goes. The rest stay with us." "And what do we do when the Voltari attack?" Park looked out the window at the sky where enemy ships were gathering. "We keep doing our jobs." Word spread quickly through the hospital. Human staff who could have evacuated chose to stay. Gret volunteers appeared to help. And then, unexpectedly, Voltari patients began to act. Subleader Kreth organized them. 27 Voltari soldiers who had been treated at the hospital, who had been shown kindness by their enemies, who had learned that there was more to existence than war. They gathered in the hospital courtyard. "We will not fight against our own people," Kreth told Park. "But we will not fight against you either. We will stand between." "That could get you killed." "Perhaps, but it would mean something. Our deaths would mean something." Private Marcus Chen found himself standing with Kreth as the countdown to attack continued. "This is crazy," he said. "You know that, right?" "Human, I have been at war for 112 years. I have seen every kind of death. But here, in this place, I have seen something new. I have seen enemies become friends. I have seen hatred transformed into understanding. If this is crazy, then I prefer crazy to what I knew before." Marcus thought about Teth, the old soldier who had died in his arms. He thought about the promise he had made. He thought about Alina and Daniel back home, about the world he wanted them to inherit. "Yeah," he said, "me too." Above them, Commander Thex watched his fleet move into attack position. He had given the orders. His ships were responding. In less than an hour, they would begin the assault that would destroy the human hospital and everyone in it. He felt sick. For 200 years, he had commanded fleets without hesitation. He had ordered millions of deaths without a second thought. It was war. It was what they did. It was all they knew. But now he knew something else. He had seen something else, and he could not pretend anymore. "Sub-Commander," he said, "open a channel to the High Command." Iran looked at him with surprise. "Commander." "Do it." The channel opened. The face of High Commander Vrax appeared on screen, ancient and terrible and absolute. He had ruled the Voltari for 500 years. His word was law throughout the Empire. "Commander Thex," Vrax said, "you have your orders. Why are you contacting me?" Thex straightened his shoulders. He knew what he was about to do, he knew what it would cost, and he did it anyway. "High Commander, I request permission to negotiate a permanent ceasefire with the humans." "Silence, then you what?" "The humans are not like other species. They fight with honor and heal without condition. They have shown our soldiers a different way of thinking, a different way of being. I believe we can learn from them." "Learn from them? They are prey, Thex. They are enemies to be crushed." "They are more than that, High Commander. They are something we have never seen before. And if we destroy them, we destroy our one chance to become something better ourselves." Vrax's face twisted with rage. "You have lost your mind. You are relieved of command. Your second will carry out the attack, and you will be executed for treason." "Perhaps," Thex said, "but first hear me out." And then Commander Thex, 200-year veteran of the Voltari Imperial Fleet, did something no one had ever done before. He told the High Commander what he had seen. He described the hospital, the medics, the soldiers who healed their enemies. He talked about Teth, about Kreth, about all the small moments of connection that had accumulated over 6 weeks. He talked for 30 minutes, and the High Commander listened, though whether from shock or curiosity nobody could say. When Thex finished, there was silence. Then Vrax spoke. "You have seen all this yourself?" "Yes, High Commander." "And you believe it is genuine, not a trick, not a trap?" "The humans would have to be playing a game 3,000 years old to fool us so thoroughly. No species has that kind of patience or commitment." Thex paused. "I believe they are exactly what they appear to be, a people who have found a way to be warriors without losing their souls." Vrax was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed the course of galactic history. "Continue observing, Commander Thex. Do not attack. Report everything you learn." And just like that, the war was over. The news reached the hospital an hour before the attack was supposed to begin. Lieutenant Park received the message on her comm unit and had to read it 3 times before she believed it. "It's over," she told her team. "The Voltari are standing down." Cheers erupted throughout the hospital. Humans hugged Gret. Voltari soldiers stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had happened. For the first time in memory, a Voltari fleet had retreated without victory. But it was not really a retreat, and everyone knew it. It was something else, something new, the beginning of something nobody had ever seen before. Subleader Kreth found Marcus in the chaos of celebration. "Human," he said. "Marcus, what happens now?" Marcus looked at the alien who had been his enemy, then his patient, and now something more. "I don't know, but whatever it is, we figure it out together." Over the following months, everything changed. Commander Thex's reports spread through the Voltari Empire, causing controversy and debate. Some called him a traitor. Others called him a prophet. The High Commander said nothing publicly, but he allowed the reports to circulate. The hospital on Nexar 7 became permanent. It was expanded, improved, and open to anyone who needed help. Humans, Gret, and Voltari worked there side by side. They argued and learned and slowly, gradually, built something new. The Galactic Council sent observers. They watched in silence as human medics treated patients from a dozen species. They listened as human soldiers explained their philosophy of war. They studied the Geneva Convention and the Hague Conventions, and 100 other documents that attempted to put limits on humanity's capacity for violence. And slowly, incredibly, they began to ask questions of their own. "Perhaps," one observer reported to the council, "we have been doing this wrong. Perhaps there is another way." The debate that followed would last for decades. Some species embraced the human approach immediately. Others rejected it completely. Most fell somewhere in between, uncertain and struggling to reconcile what they saw with what they had always known. But the seed had been planted. The idea that enemies could be treated with dignity, that war could have limits, that violence did not have to be total, these concepts spread through the galaxy like a slow-moving wave. Admiral Sarah Chen lived to see the first Galactic Accord signed 20 years later. The document, based heavily on human models, established basic rights for prisoners, wounded, and civilians in all interstellar conflicts. 47 species signed it initially. Within a century, that number would reach 300. At the signing ceremony, Chen gave a short speech. She was 82 years old, white-haired and tired, but her voice was strong. "On Earth," she said, "we have a saying. You can judge a society by how it treats its weakest members. I would add to that, you can judge a species by how it treats its enemies. We are all capable of cruelty. The question is whether we choose to be more than that. In the crowd, sub-leader Kreth, now an old warrior himself, stood beside Marcus Chen. Both had gray in their hair. Both had grandchildren. Both had spent 30 years building bridges between their peoples. "She's not wrong," Kreth said quietly. Marcus nodded. "She never was." After the ceremony, they walked together through the gardens that surrounded the council building. Somewhere above them, ships from 100 worlds moved through the stars. Some were warships. Some were traders. Some were medical vessels, marked with symbols that every species now recognized. "Do you think it will last?" Kreth asked. "Peace, I mean real peace." Marcus thought about it. He thought about all the battles he had seen, all the wounded he had treated, all the enemies who had become friends. He thought about his daughter Alina, who had married a Gret diplomat, and his son Daniel, who commanded a joint human-Voltari exploration vessel. "No," he said honestly. "There will always be fighting. People will always find reasons to hurt each other. That's part of who we are." "Then why do you keep trying?" "Because the other part of who we are, the part that heals enemies and treats wounded with kindness and believes in second chances, that part is worth fighting for." Marcus smiled. "Besides, what's the alternative? Give up. Let the darkness win." Kreth's mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned to recognize as affection. "You humans are impossibly optimistic." "It's our best feature." They walked in silence for a while. Then Kreth said, "I was supposed to die in that war, you know. When you saved me on the battlefield, I was ready for death. I had been ready for 100 years. And now? Now I have grandchildren who have never seen combat. I have friends from species I once considered enemies. I have watched the universe change in ways I never imagined possible." Kreth stopped and turned to face Marcus. "You gave me that. Your people gave us all that." Marcus shook his head. "We didn't give you anything. We just showed you what was possible. You chose to reach for it yourself." "Perhaps, but you showed us first." In the sky above them, the stars were coming out. The same stars that had watched 1,000 wars, 1,000,000 atrocities, billions of deaths. But also the same stars that had witnessed the first galactic accords, the establishment of the Universal Medical Corps, the slow and painful birth of a more compassionate galaxy. Earth sent warriors who healed enemies after battle, and everyone was confused. But out of that confusion came questions. Out of questions came understanding. And out of understanding came change. It was not perfect. Nothing ever is, but it was better. It was a beginning. And sometimes, that is all any of us can hope for. Years later, when Marcus was very old, a young human officer asked him what the most important moment of his life was. He expected to hear about a battle, a treaty, a historic event. Instead, Marcus told him about a wounded Voltari soldier on a bloody battlefield, about holding pressure on a wound while the universe fell apart around him, about looking into 4 alien eyes and seeing not an enemy, but a person. "That's when I knew," Marcus said. "That's when I knew we could change everything." The young officer didn't fully understand. Perhaps he never would. But he remembered the story, and years later he told it to his own children. And so the legend grew. Earth sent warriors who healed enemies after battle. It became a saying, a proverb, a guiding principle for species across the galaxy. It appeared in schools and military academies and diplomatic training programs. It became, in the end, what humanity was known for. Not their weapons or their technology or their fearlessness in battle, but their stubborn, irrational, impossibly hopeful insistence that every life has value. Even the lives of enemies. Especially the lives of enemies. Because in the end, that is what makes the difference between a species that conquers the stars and one that truly inherits them.